My pleasure to welcome you to this session on climate and conservation, what's happening in Virginia. As the program guide mentions, last year was the Virginia Funders Network first environmental session. Just out of curiosity, how many of you were in that first session last year? Okay, there was a few of us. I hope we didn't scare anybody away. Gray and I were one of the presenters last year, so I'm glad to see all of you here today. And, we really do realize how many important issues there are that face Virginia funders these days and how many that you're dealing with. So we're really glad that you decided to come here as well and to hear about some of the special issues that are going on in the conservation world. When you think of what makes Virginia and our community special, the environment's a big part of that. But it can be challenging, especially for small and medium-sized foundations, to know how you can have an impact. So we hope that today's session will give you some insights on how you might be involved. Now, a real quick commercial for those of you that do not know, my organization, the Virginia Environmental Endowment, was the first private grant-making foundation in the nation focused exclusively on environmental improvement. We were founded nearly 50 years ago as a result of the settlement of a lawsuit against a chemical company for polluting the James River and impairing the health of the workers with a toxic insecticide called ketone. Now, just looking out here, there may be a few of us old-timers that remember ketone, right? So I see a couple of heads. Okay, maybe more than I thought. The ketone disaster that occurred in Hopewell closed the James River to commercial fishing from Richmond to the Bay for 13 years. It was really our equivalent to Love Canal or the Cuyahoga River catching on fire. Since then, VEE has made over 1,500 grants to about 500 organizations throughout Virginia, including providing catalytic grants to some of Virginia's most prominent conservation organizations. Just real quickly, our current strategic priorities are the protection of local rivers, the restoration of Chesapeake Bay, land conservation, environmental education, and climate resilience. We also have two special programs. The first is to improve the water quality of the James River, and the second is for community conservation projects in a portion of Southwest Virginia. Our work focuses on making tangible difference on the ground or in the water, filling gaps that might exist, addressing underserved communities, and building capacity. If you're interested, we would be more than happy to talk to you about partnering opportunities, and there is some more information on the table back there as well. Two final things. First is to point you to my VFN colleagues who served on the planning team for this session. Their names are in the program, but if you're here and you want to raise your hand, we'd be glad to recognize you. Some people don't want to raise their hand. Okay, I see that. And then second, I've been asked to, if I can do this, Lincoln, we'll see.
It's already there.
Unbelievable.
It's there.
It worked?
It's there.
It worked, okay. Okay, so the last thing I've been asked to do is to recognize the sponsor for the session, the River Counties Community Foundation, the Virginia Outdoors Foundation, and my organization, the Virginia Environmental Endowment. And with that, I would like to turn over the program to our moderator, Nathan Burrell, who is the Director of Community Conservation and Government Relations with the Virginia Outdoors Foundation.
Thank you, Joe. It's pretty hard to follow Joe, but I'm going to try. So welcome to this very important session on funding in the environment. As you all know, our issues here in Virginia are not unique to what's going on across the globe or in the United States. But Virginia itself is very unique, and we have unique challenges. From the eastern shore and flooding and coastal impacts that we are seeing, to central Virginia and localized flooding and issues of heat islands, issues of just resiliency in community, to our mountains, where we see past environmental degradations that we are seeking solutions to mitigate, to truly improve our environment. Today I am honored to be the moderator for this very prestigious panel that we have. First, we're going to talk about Virginia globally, and kind of like what's going on, more holistic, right? So we're going to look at some of the policies, some of the advocacy work that's taking place from some of our Virginia organizations, and then we're going to drill down. We're going to look at what's happening on the ground. And how does this work go from policy and advocacy to actual on-the-ground things impacting people in their communities? So with that, I'm going to start with Mary Carson-Siff, who is the Executive Director of Wetlands Watch. She's going to talk to us about kind of what's happening on the coast and bring it deeper into Virginia for us. So without further ado, Mary Carson.
All right, so we are thrilled to be included in this conference and appreciate the invitation to talk with you all today. Okay, all right, so climate and conservation in Virginia. Yes, I'm going to talk about what's happening in coastal communities, but we are experiencing climate impacts statewide, as Nathan said, and so this is going to touch on a little bit of everything. Our organization does work statewide and in Southwest Virginia in one of the regions that Joe mentioned through a Virginia Environmental Endowment Grant. Okay, so a little bit about our organization. Anybody heard of us? Show me hands. Not very many, that's cool. Okay. So Wetlands Watch was founded in 2001, and we seek to conserve and protect shoreline ecosystems from the impacts of climate change across Virginia, and we work beyond the state of Virginia. We are based in Norfolk, where we experience our climate changing daily. We work through a number of different avenues. First, we work through the regulatory landscape to ensure shoreline protection laws, regulations, and guidance are respected and followed to keep our wetlands and other riverine buffers protected. We work through education and outreach to inform the public and community leaders about the impacts of climate change and equip community members with a voice to actually see risk reduction strategies implemented on the ground. We work top down, bottom up, side to side, any way that actually makes an impact at the parcel level. We believe in collective impact and the strength of partnerships to achieve shared goals. We are developing innovative strategies to help actually address the impacts of climate change, and we are deeply committed to workforce development in this space. So I'm going to give the kind of the state of how things are in Virginia. It's a little depressing, so bear with me. So in Virginia, we have two major driving forces of climate change. Sea level rise is the first I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to focus on Norfolk, Virginia, where sea level rise rates are the highest on the East Coast. So the reason why we're experiencing sea level rise is due to a couple different factors. Glacial melt, our glaciers are melting, and it's causing us to sink further. Groundwater withdrawal, so pumping for paper production, for example. Actual water rise due to sea level rise. And all of the sea level rise impacts are actually exacerbated, which we've recently learned, through a slowing Gulf Stream. So climate change is affecting our ocean currents, and in coastal Virginia, we happen to be on the wrong side of that impact in the sense that the slowing of the Gulf Stream is pushing more water directly to coastal Virginia. This is a map that shows our actual historic rate of sea level rise. This is data of water levels from the Sewell's Point tide gauge, so this is not projected, this is history. In the past 100 years, we have experienced 1.5 feet of sea level rise. What does the future look like with sea level rise? We're looking at that historic rate of 1.5 feet for the last 100 years, and we're doubling it, basically. So 3 feet of sea level rise projected by 2065. You can see the little gray boxes. Those are indicated, those are showing how the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission is looking at planning for change. So those increments of short-term, mid-term, long-term risk. This is an important kind of step-by-step to soften the blow of the impact from a planning perspective. And these planning scenarios have been adopted by the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. The second stressor is rainfall. So in Virginia, we have seen about 18% annual or average increase in rainfall amounts and intensity of storms. So this is since 2006. You can see the red curve, the red line, that's showing the historical data that is setting all of our stormwater management standards, how big are our pipes, how big are our retention and detention ponds. That data is so outdated, and what the data that we really need to be planning for is represented on the red line. So this is explaining why our communities are flooding so badly, because our systems were never intended to address the amount of water that we're experiencing. So, sea level rise and rainfall. These climate stressors are actually changing our lives in Virginia, and it's happening now. This is not coming. We're in it, experiencing it today. The following statistics that I'm going to share are from the Virginia Coastal Resilience Master Plan, which was completed in 2021. The most staggering impacts for our organization and our mission are related to wetlands losses. So the Coastal Resilience Master Plan says that by 2080, we can stand to lose 89% of our tidal wetlands in Virginia if we do not plan for those wetlands to move landward. In Virginia, unfortunately, our wetlands have a vertical growth rate that is slower than our sea level rise vertical growth rate. So wetlands are drowning in place. Too much water overtopping them, and they can't survive that amount of water. So they have to be able to move landward. And this 89% loss for tidal wetlands is what's at stake if we do not plan for that migration. It's not just our tidal wetlands, it's our upland wetlands as well. 51% loss of that resource by 2080 without landward migration planning. One little note about wetlands, they are the most productive ecosystems in the world, more than coral reefs, more than rainforests. And we have an abundance of them here in Virginia. What a gift. But if we do not do what we need to actually protect them today and tomorrow, then we'll lose the economic benefits as well as the societal benefits that wetlands provide. So let's talk about transportation impacts. This is what rainfall, this is what sea level rise, rainfall with the truck, and sea level rise with the hospital and the rail system. These are what the impacts look like in my city, in Norfolk. The Coastal Resilience Master Plan says that by 2080, we will see 2,800 miles of Virginia's roadways chronically flooded. That's compared to 500 miles today. In coastal Virginia, all over Virginia, we are experiencing flood days instead of snow days at school. So increased temperatures are taking away our snow days, but don't worry kids, there are flood days. And this is actually occurring. People are driving through floodwater, which is causing all kinds of issues with resale because of the saltwater intrusion and the corrosion of engines. The master plan also reveals how buildings will be affected. So by 2080, there will be 340,000 buildings that will be exposed to extreme coastal flooding. And this is a 150% increase from current numbers. Nearly 1 million residents will be exposed to major flooding by 2080, and our annualized flood damage will actually increase from $0.4 billion today to $5.1 billion in 2080. So this is what's at stake. But good news, there's federal money, right? Everyone's excited about federal money. Well, federal money is great if you can handle learning about federal money and applying for federal money. And this is where I know I am preaching to the choir. You all get that. But this is serious for the climate change world and the resilience world. It is kind of like a false hope that is being perpetuated in the media and by others. And so we have to get real about how this money will actually work and who's actually going to get it and benefit from the money. So this is extremely competitive and costly to apply for. We've spoken with a lot of people, and the amount of time to actually prepare a federal grant is ranging from $1,000 to $10,000. And we've talked to some communities who've said, that's not high enough. We're paying our consultants double. From a climate change perspective, the grant programs, the projects that you're applying for, that are being funded, they're not actually requiring future conditions be a part of your project proposal. And this is doing a disservice to the greater community and the greater work that needs to be done. Nobody wants to fund crazy exploratory projects, but climate change is presenting Wild West science fiction type scenarios and life for our communities, and we have to think of appropriately commensurate climate change science fiction like strategies to actually get ahead of this, or even just survive it. And so nobody wants to fund that, especially federal grantors. They're like, what are you talking about? So our hope and our goal for redirecting federal monies is to have it fund large infrastructure projects, which is what big funders are comfortable doing, but make sure that these projects are centered in neighborhoods and centered in neighborhood voices and with neighborhood feedback. And our organization runs a collaboratory program where we're doing just this, to ensure that residents have a say in what is happening in their community. But this is really hard work, and most communities are not doing it because they don't have capacity. This is the prioritization of co-development of projects and strategies. And we have done this successfully. Now, we've done it successfully with some big caveats. We made mistakes and it wasn't perfect, but this work in climate adaptation and resilience planning, it's all about refinement, acknowledging mistakes and moving forward and doing better next time. This project is actually a Virginia Sea Grant funded project where in Norfolk, Virginia, the Chesterfield Heights neighborhood, where we brought in student teams from Old Dominion University's engineering department and Hampton University's architecture department. And we let them loose in this neighborhood working with the Civic League. And we said, create some flood resilience designs. Stop some of the flooding in this neighborhood. And they came up with some designs and they presented to the city council and to city staff as a way to, elevate the voices of these young students. And the city said, oh, that sounds great. And then they applied for a HUD grant and they got the money using professional designs to improve the percentage of design that the students actually created. And the city of Norfolk actually got funding to do this project. It is incredible. If you ever want to come down to Norfolk, we'd love to show you around. So that's what's possible with federal funding. Now, what about state funding? There is, for the very first time, real significant investment in local government flood risk planning and capacity, and it's called the Virginia Community Flood Preparedness Fund. And this resource is administered by the Department of Conservation and Recreation and is funded, as of last December through Virginia's participation in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Emission Program. So RGGI was actually funding this. 45% of each RGGI auction would go into a bucket of money to fund these grants. First time the state has really invested in flood risk resilience planning before disasters in Virginia. This is bringing capacity to local governments, and that is exactly what we should all be working on in this space. We also have a new program that's a revolving fund, and this program has not been utilized yet because our local government staff aren't able to take on what it actually means to manage a loan program. You need to have capacity, you need to have borrowing capacity, and you need to have a willing population of interested parties. And we're not there yet, but this shows progression in our state funding landscape that reveals we are ready to take on more buckets of funding, because more buckets of funding increases the chance of having a real impact on the ground. Finally, I'm going to toot our horn with our partner Nathan. We have launched a new grant program that's meager in comparison to the other programs, but certainly packs a punch in terms of its distribution, called the Coastal Resilience and Trees Fund. And this fund is in response to all of the challenges that the federal grants landscape and most of the state's grants landscapes. Inability to reach people who really need the funding list. We did a massive needs assessment where we reached out to local government staff, organizations like Wetlands Watch and the nonprofit environmental community, civic associations, and said, hey, what kind of grant program do you want? What are your barriers to access money? How can we make this program easier for you? And we designed the grant program based off of that needs assessment. So it's intended to be kind of like a gap filler. You can use it for all sorts of different projects. And we've awarded about $160,000 in just 1 year. So projects that are small, green infrastructure, rain gardens, living shorelines, things like that, that are making a big difference at protecting against the impacts from climate change. So this is where our private foundations really come into play. With climate adaptation, local governments are on the front lines. Neighborhoods are on the front lines. Tribal communities, regional commissions, planning district commissions, all fall under that local government bucket according to our Virginia State Code. These communities need help. And if you can't fund local governments, then please fund entities that are working very closely with local governments. For example, speaking to the non-coastal part of the state, CERCAP is an incredible organization that is providing essential funding to local governments, to community members, to neighborhoods. Our organization is trying to fulfill a similar goal. It's also, I just want to share that the best climate adaptation work is happening through local land use decision making, planning, zoning, building codes, flood zones work. Neighborhood and parcel scale strategies and improvements. This is where we're making a really big impact. And finally, in this space that's exploratory and innovative and new, we really need funders that are bold and willing to fund relationship building, research, innovation, partnership, experimentation. We need new solutions. And some of these things, they could fail. And it's really hard for people to want to fund projects that might not succeed. But without trying, we'll never know if success is possible. So this is an unusual landscape. It's kind of unusual times, and we're really excited about people kind of learning about what that means. This is my neighborhood, just a plug for our children in the future. This is a street that's completely impassable, and it's a beautiful day and just a little bit of wind. So this is really what we're talking about here, our kids and our neighborhoods. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Marcy. Now we're going to turn it over to Chris Moore, the Executive Director of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Chris?
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for the invite. It's always great to be talking to a group of folks about Chesapeake Bay and local water quality as well on the afternoon. So what I wanted to kind of do, first of all, is give a little background on Chesapeake Bay Foundation, kind of where we work, and remind people a little bit about what the Bay watershed is in Virginia. Sometimes folks don't realize how much of Virginia is or not in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So basically, everything you see there in the map in the green is Chesapeake Bay watershed. So about 60% of the Commonwealth of Virginia is actually in that area. So we're fortunate enough to have a broad reach in terms of where we get to work within the Commonwealth. But it also means we have a whole lot of different issues that we can work on, and obviously we need help in working on those. If you're not familiar with the Bay Foundation's efforts here in Virginia, was able to do that with the map folder as well. The blue dots you see there are actually our education program sites that are one-day programs throughout Virginia. And these are mostly canoe rig type programs. Also in Hampton Roads in Virginia Beach, we also have boat programs as well in those regions. And so our mantra when it comes to education at CVF is to get the students out of the classroom for the day. In some cases, you'll also see that we have 3 island education centers as well. Those are spread out in Chesapeake Bay. When their cell phone dies, the first 2 hours, because they're so far away from the cell phone tower, that's a win, is what it amounts to. And so that is our program, to get them out and explore the resource, to touch the fish, to play with the crabs. Yes, if you get bitten by them every once in a while, that's okay. But to really connect with that resource, because it is so much more impactful if they're actually touching it, feeling that he's been spending a day. You know, we're in Richmond today. It is amazing the number of students that we work with from the city of, places like the city of Richmond, even places like Norfolk, Virginia Beach, who although water runs right through the middle of their city, maybe right through their neighborhood, they've never actually been out on one of Virginia's waterways. And so that's another big connection that we really like to make with those folks, is providing those opportunities for those students and those teachers to get those students out there and actually connect with that resource. And so we hope these programs do it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of those pieces as well. You know, we also do some stuff that's not quite as fun. We do a lot of advocacy. We have an office here in Richmond because of our advocacy work, both with the General Assembly and also with the state agencies here. Again, it's not the funnest work. A lot of times we have rooms like this, but it really is the type of work that sets the stage for funding environmental programs in the Commonwealth, cost share programs for wastewater treatment plants, cost share programs for farmers. It's really important that we make those connections with legislators in our state in order to be successful long-term environmental improvement. In addition, we have a tremendous regulatory structure in Virginia, and being part of that is obviously really, really important as well. And so we take part in as much of those as we can. Restoration, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but we're involved in several different types of restoration. One that's near and dear to me is oyster restoration. How can you be in Virginia and not love oysters? If you don't like to eat them, that's okay. Just be very happy about the restoration of them, because I'll talk about this a little bit in a minute, but they are one of our natural ways we may be able to combat sea old rise here in the Commonwealth, and we're exploring those types of ideas, giving them the right tools to connect with the folks who are making decisions at that time, so they have those opportunities to make impacts in their community. So that's another reason why we invest so heavily in our advocacy work in the Commonwealth. Got that right? Good. So just I wanted to highlight a few of the different programs that we work on and can give you a few visuals on that. And first of all, I kind of start at the top left. Clean water obviously should be a right of everyone, and people should be able to recreate throughout the Commonwealth without concerns for water quality and things like that. And that's why CVF has been so involved in trying to reduce pollutants going into the Chesapeake Bay. We focus a lot on nitrogen and phosphorus. They're fertilizers, which are good in the right amount, but unfortunately we have too much of them, so they create a host of water quality problems. One of the really important things moving forward is about a year and a half ago, one of the groups called the Chesapeake Bay Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee, they just released a report called the Comprehensive Evaluation System Response. We call it CESAR. See, I always call it CESAR, so I forget the actual words there. But what that report basically said is we need to move our restoration efforts into the shallows. We need to move our restoration efforts to the areas where, as you see in that picture, people interact with our waterways. And we're going to see greater success in that moving forward. And so I think moving forward, you will see lots of shoreline type projects, lots of underwater grass projects, lots of projects that hopefully reduce sediment right along our waterways and things like that. So just wanted to give you what we think will be coming in the next couple of years when it comes to bay restoration. The center picture there, perfect example of a living shoreline project, and kind of what Mary Carson was talking about. Making sure that not only we defend our shorelines against this increased erosion, but we keep those natural habitats as much in place as possible, because the science is telling us when we do these projects correctly, they have the same ecosystem benefit as a natural shoreline. And this is a great example of a project that's included a lot of oyster habitat as well, because we know as sea level rise, oysters will grow vertically in the water column, and they can help become natural buffers and natural protectors of our waterways. Moving on to the right, top right there, our urban restoration program. I'm fairly new to this position at CDF, and one of the things I've done is make a few changes to the office. And for the first time, we actually have an urban restoration coordinator in Virginia. And that staff person is going to focus on tree restoration, buffer restoration, converting impervious surface to pervious surfaces in these urban areas. Trees are one of the best investments we can make in bay restoration. One of the things I really note about that, though, thankfully there's some groups in this room who know this message loud and clear. It's not just planting the trees that's important, it's maintaining those trees 2, 3, 4, 5 years beyond to make sure they are successful and they are growing. They're not being taken over by invasive species. So we can't just plant trees and walk away. We really need those maintenance funds to continue to maintain those trees until they're large enough to go on their own. I'll move down. Environmental education. CDF is fortunate enough to be one of the largest environmental education groups in the U.S. It's still one of our best investments when it comes to dollars in the environmental space. Again, we talked about the fact that we want to get those students out on the waterways like this, and that is, like I say, an important part of their experience. In addition, it's not just students. We invest a tremendous amount of resources during the summertime to get those teachers out, to get those principals out, so they know the value of those programs and the value that they bring to their schools, their school systems, and what their teachers are learning is that. So it's great when we can get those educators and their bosses out on the waterway as well, so they understand what the students are learning throughout the year. And then the last there is kind of a catch-all, but Mary Carson talked a little bit about this as well, is innovating in the restoration space. It's so important. As you can imagine, everyone is trying to reduce the cost of restoration. And so we want to think about ways that we can continue to innovate in the bay restoration space. This is actually our office down in Hampton Roads, Virginia. It's called the Rock Environmental Center. I invite you to come visit, hold a meeting there anytime you'd like to. I still pinch myself because it's the best office in Virginia, I think, since right on the shores of the Main River. But you can see that it's up off the ground. It gives us great views of the Haven River. There's a reason for that. Because of sea level rise, we know that at some point we're going to have storms that are under that building quite regularly. And so we want to be up high enough that all our infrastructure is protected. And so therefore, we can close the building down, people can go home safely, storm leaves, tides reside, and we can go right back and work. And that's the type of innovation that we think we need when it comes to sea level rise in the Commonwealth. In addition, we're actually the first publicly permitted building in all the United States to use rainwater for all of our both potable and non-potable sources in the Commonwealth. So those are the type of innovations where, again, we're being able to be more conservative about our natural resources. Another program that I wanted to highlight that's there as well is a really unique partnership we have with the City of Virginia Beach Public Schools. We actually added a new building right beside that building there about 3 years ago, and we actually serve as the host for the Virginia Beach Public Schools Environmental Studies program. So students come for a half day, juniors and seniors. There's about 50 students in the program. Obviously, the students are from the school system. The school system provided basically a site manager, which is equivalent to a principal, a teacher, and then also an administrative assistant. And those students really have an outdoor classroom type experience. My office, I won't say office, but my cube in the building there is closest to them. They spend much more time outside than they actually do inside what is even a very neat classroom. But they really get to experience our outdoors in so many different ways. Not only do they get to experience natural resources, the second part of that internship of that program is actually an internship with one of the local businesses, community nonprofits, you name it. So they actually get real world experience before they head off to their college experience. So another way that these unique partnerships can actually work when it comes to our environmental space. So thank you very much. Happy to answer some questions later on.
We understand what's happening here in Virginia, what some of the issues are, right? see that there's some policy work happening, see where the advocacy work is happening. But as we think about all of these issues that are taking place here in the Commonwealth, it's really easy to see the issue and not see the impact. And the impact is actually happening to people like you. And most of the communities that this impact is adversely happening in are communities of color. These are the frontline communities. And so as we think about moving from advocacy and policy work and the global perspective of what's happening here in Virginia, now we're going to start talking about on the ground work. How are we equitably ensuring that all Virginians are not only able to engage in this battle of regenerating our environment, but are also a part of that resiliency plan, that they're not forgotten, that they're not just pushed out of their neighborhoods. So we're going to talk now, we're going to go into Elizabeth Andrews from the UVA Institute of Engagement and Negotiation. And she's really going to talk about the work that she's been doing with the RAP project and getting this work down into the ground, into communities in an equitable fashion. So, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Ooh, you even said hello back. All right, so we love our acronyms. So I'm here to talk to you today about the RAP, the Resilience Adaptation Feasibility Tool. I won't quiz you on that later, but it's a really, if I do say so myself, a really cool partnership between 3 universities, the University of Virginia, the Institute for Engagement and Negotiation, and also Virginia Tech, and also Old Dominion University. So I have to tell you right up front, when we go into work with local governments, so many times they say, wait a minute, you have 3 universities that are playing well together in the sandbox, and you're going to stick with us for a year? You're not going to study us and leave? So that's why I say that, because it's a wonderful opportunity to really get into the community, work down in the grassroots, and figure out what do they want to do to become more resilient. So a key aspect of the RAP is the community is in the driver's seat. They make the decisions about the strategies that they want to pursue to become more resilient. And I'm going to tell you about the process in a moment. But I just want to stress that to you right up front. It's community driven. It's the community that comes to the table throughout that year that you're with them and work their way through their action checklist of things they want to do. We adapt our support in this program to each locality's needs. So the RAP has various iterations I'll tell you about. You tweak it for whatever that region or that locality needs in order to build their resilience. And an important part for you all to know is that it is at no cost to the locality. We could not do this program without the support of our funders. The Virginia Environmental Endowment, and also the Coastal Zone Management Program at the State Department of Environmental Quality, 2 stalwart funders every round. In addition to that, we couldn't do it without foundation support. When we worked on the Eastern Shore, it was an anonymous foundation. In the Middle Peninsula and the Northern Neck of Virginia, it was the DuPont Fund. We could not do it without funders with us because this is not paid for by the General Assembly. We don't get an appropriation from them. It's not paid for by state agencies. They help us out by coming to the table and working with localities, but they don't give us any monetary support. So you all are important to us. And this has been a partnership since 2015. I will note that the Institute for Engagement and Negotiation at UVA has been around since 1980. It used to be the Institute for Environmental Negotiation, if anybody was familiar with that. But in 2019, there was a rebranding, a recognition about how important it was to try to incorporate community engagement in every aspect of policy making and do stakeholder engagement to increase equity in our different efforts. Not having a training on this. This is not a touch screen. Thank you. I just noted this, that the funding that we get is so important to us because there's a management program, VEE, the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund, the AGWA Fund has been a key funder of our work with the Virginia Indian tribes in consulting with them to see if we can, remember I mentioned we tweak the RAP as needed, to see if we can alter the RAP process and the RAP scorecard I'm going to tell you about to accommodate the individual needs of our sovereign nations that we have now in the state of Virginia. We do get some general background staff funding from the Virginia Sea Grant Program and the Commonwealth Center for Credit Flooding Resilience. All right, so we started out with research and development of the raft. By the way, NIFWIF, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, helped to fund that effort. Then we worked with 3 pilot localities, a county, a city, a town, that were from geographically dispersed areas, and they were fantastic. They actually went through the process with us. We have developed especially a scorecard for this project to score how resilience is incorporated into a community's programs and policies and plans. And they actually went through the torture of doing it themselves and said, yes, that's great, no locality would never do that, yes, you should score them on that. Then we worked with the Eastern Shore of Virginia, and let me note up front that we've partnered with the planning district commissions in each of these regions. It's really important to do that, because not only can they open doors for you, but I'd like to say they have the street cred. They know what their communities are facing. We don't, as academics coming in, know it like they know it. And so they are key partners in this entire effort. The Northern Neck, right now, and the Middle Peninsula, right now we are finishing up working with Commonwealth and Petersburg in the Crater Planning District Commission area, 2 very under-resourced cities. So we limited it to those 2 localities within the crater. And we are excited to say we're expanding into southwestern Virginia and working, as I mentioned, with the Virginia Indian tribes and revising the scorecard accordingly. So for example, in southwest Virginia, we are pulling together focus groups with state agencies and experts and academic advisors from various universities to talk about the risks that are faced there. You have flash flooding, riverine flooding. You don't have the sea level rise issue you have in coastal Virginia. Wildfire risk is increased. So pulling together and experts to tweak the scorecard and also to talk to them, the communities. We're going to work with 2 communities longer term and talk about renewable energy as one of the pathways to more resilience. And with the tribes, as I mentioned, Agua Fund gave us funding to consult with the tribes, and we're hoping to get additional funding to continue to work with the various tribes. All right, so what is this RAP process? All right, it's 3 steps, a total of 18 months of support, as I mentioned. First is we do a quantitative assessment, i.e. the scorecard, and we do a qualitative assessment, where we pull together, we proactively go out in the community, and we find groups that work with socially and physically vulnerable communities, and we pull them into the process. It actually started on the Eastern Shore of Virginia when we did our first region. We pulled together representatives of localities to develop their action checklists of things to become more resilient. And we realized as the year went on, the membership in these teams, these implementation teams to implement these things, just kept growing during the years. People went, no one needs to be here, so-and-so, or this group, they should be here. And so this is like, we realized we had to have a concerted effort up front, so you don't just get the list, frankly, of folks from the locality that always show up at the meetings, right? That's what you're gonna get if you ask for local government. Who should we invite? And that's great, invite them, but that's not the end of the list. That takes a lot of effort, frankly, it's a big lift. But we do interviews and focus groups with community service providers. And then we have a resilience action workshop in partnership with the Planning District Commission. And we bring in locality representatives, we provide them with an opportunity list of things that are pulled from the scorecard, things you can work on, things from your comprehensive plan, things you could work on, things from the regional hazard mitigation plan, things you could work on. Thank you. And then they develop a checklist of things, and then we stick with them for a year and work through that checklist of items and help them to implement them. We bring state agencies to the table, academic experts to the table, and try to connect them with funding opportunities. And we really found one of the greatest gifts of the RAP is that organizational structure, that creation of a community-wide discussion about resilience, a community-wide understanding of the risks that they're facing, and the facilitation of these meetings. There we go. All right, this is my favorite slide because I get to talk to you about a regional resilience equity work group that we did in the Northern Neck and Peninsula, and as you can tell, thank you to the DuPont Fund, because we could not have done it without them. I mean, seriously, it was key funding, we could not have provided this. Lincoln is also part of that, thank you for participating. We have 6 subgroups that have been pulled together for this equity work group. It was launched in January of 2023, and I wanted to share with you just a couple of the projects that they're working on, and that's why I'm so excited about it. The food security subgroup is having a grand opening for an Essex garden in Essex County, a community garden, May 18th, 2 o'clock, which if anyone wants to attend. The economic development and living wages subgroup has been pulling together the latest census data and demographic and regional drivers that they're looking at, trying to figure out the cost of living and income gap in the region. And there's a funding need there I want to highlight because they would like to commission a postdoc or an economics graduate fellow to conduct a literature review and analysis on what establishing a regional living wage would look like in the region. So it's such an important thing. The transit subgroup has been focusing on increasing transportation access, particularly programming providing confidential transportation to participants in opioid addiction and substance abuse programs. The affordable housing and shelter subgroup is focusing on first-time renters and first-time homeowners, developing a guide for them, and is planning to host a seminar about those topics later in the year. And the program for youth and families subgroup is focusing on local daycare and child care facility support work, conducting surveys to help determine the policy initiatives that they should pursue. So as you can tell, a wide variety of work, really important work down in the community that we're very proud of. That's the end of my section. No, not quite. I'm rushing. It's going to hit me. All right, as I mentioned, the RAP generates community-wide discussion about resilience. That is key. So many times local residents will say, we never had a network of people to talk to about this. And on Eastern Shore, they said, when a hurricane hit, we didn't have a call. For the first time, we had this network. Builds that strong network, transcends the silos of resilience, offers the only structured long-term process for community-based, community-driven holistic resilience planning down in this grassroots. And we focus on equity throughout the scorecard. We have 5 categories in the scorecard. You might have, the usual ones to expect are emergency services and planning and infrastructure, but we have a 5th category that's all about community health and well-being and food security and things that a lot of localities, frankly, score not so well on because it's not what they traditionally thought of as resilience. I'd like to say we look at resilience writ large, right, in that category. So, our funding needs, as I mentioned, anything from that research to help establish a living wage for the region, our work with localities. Our next region that we're going to work with is the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. They're more rural and underserved localities, so not Norfolk, not Virginia Beach, not Hampton. We already have a lot going on in the resilience front, but more of the more rural localities there. Expanding the RAP into Southwest Virginia, continued support for the RAP alumni localities, and then frankly that general endowment and operational funds that are key. It may not be as sexy sounding, but as I mentioned, we don't get the general assembly for recreation. We just need to be able to fund this effort at the 3 university scale. The more funding we have, the more that we can help these communities. There are contexts. Thank you for not giving the show.
How many of you guys have heard of the RAP projects prior to happening? Yes, I participated in the RAP project in Petersburg, and I will have to say, what a wonderful process and way to pull community members, community groups from a very diverse background into this process and really start to talk about real issues and programs that can make change on the ground. And thank you for that, Elizabeth. Next up is someone who in my mind needs no real introduction and is very near and dear to my heart, Chief Ann Richardson of the Rappahannock Tribe. Again, no need for further introduction.
He's my son from another father. So it's a real pleasure to be with you today, and I'm really excited about all the information that I've learned since I've been here and all the wonderful nonprofits that are doing amazing work across the Commonwealth. Thank you for doing that work. And so I'd just like to start by talking about what we are doing and the short time that we've been doing it in. So we were federally recognized as a tribe in 2018, which opened up the door for some federal resources for us that we had never had. And our first priority for our tribe was to restore our ancestral lands that held the bones of our ancestors and the historical objects of our past. one of the things that made that a top priority was that a developer was trying to develop a place we call Fawn's Cliffs. And it had 3 historic towns on it that we first met Captain John Smith in 1608 when he came into our river and we first defended our homeland. And so this developer went in and he illegally cleared 13 acres of the cliff, and which caused, we had a similar rain event like we just had, and it caused the face of the cliffs to collapse into the river. Trees, it was a horrible sight, and I got really, really mad about it. And so that all automatically came to the top of what it was that we were planning to do. And so we began to form partnerships with Chesapeake Conservancy, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Department of Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Wilderness Society, National Fish and Wildlife, all of these people who kind of came together to help us fight this fight. And so we were able to secure the first town in 22, which was 465 acres. But in the meantime, the Conservation Fund of Virginia, which we weren't eligible for the funding from, it was only for municipalities, and so we had to go and get a fix for the General Assembly to even get the funding. But the person who was heading all of that up was so generous and so helpful to us, and she helped us get that passed, and we got funding from them for the 465. And then they bought the property, the 1,000 acres, which is where the developer had destroyed the front of the cliff. She got money and went to the bankruptcy auction and purchased that and for us and held it, which was like huge. And then the Chesapeake Conservancy came in and they bought the 703 acre town for us, and they're holding that for us right now. And the last 2 acquisitions will take place this year. We raised all but 1.5, something like that million. And we will wrap up that this year. Major accomplishment for the tribe. Now we're only 300 members, a little bit over. So we're like the Benjamite tribe, the little tribe that could, but we're doing mighty things. And so we started out with that and realizing the importance of our natural resources and how quickly those things were going away. Just things that I had seen in my lifetime, leaving and not being able to find these things again in our area. That became a next priority, was to start to restore those things. So we established an environmental department, and river herring was one of the main sustenance of our tribe historically, and they had all but gone away in our rivers. And so we began to restore them. We hired this amazing young man, and he has developed a mobile fish hatchery. And so we can go into the freshwater where our land is, and we can propagate herring. And then we can move it and go down into the salt water, and we can propagate oysters and crabs. And it's just amazing to see this guy do this work. Anyway, he's collected a whole group of our young people, and he's training them and educating them. And so environmental education was one of the things that we really wanted to do. And lo and behold, an opportunity came last year through U.S. Fish and Wildlife, one of our major partners. And it was a lodge that was going to be demolished. And they said, well, we don't want to demolish it. Can we give it to the tribe? And so they did. And that's going to be our Indigenous Conservation Education Center. So we're going to we just had 100 kids from Richmond County come in and spent the whole day with the tribe going through all of the different programs that they had. And so we think that's going to be a really amazing thing that's going to take off and show children the importance of our natural resources, because we understand that we're all a part of that. And if we don't have those things, then we, as human beings, cease to exist. And so what's happening now is the earth is on fire. everything. The temperature is rising, sea level is rising, and we have to do something about it. So we're busy doing shoreline restorations and planting trees and everything that we can do. And so as a part of the policy piece that we're always working on was, going to the General Assembly and getting it tweaked so that we could receive funding from the state, first of all. Second of all, we just got a consultation bill passed in the General Assembly, and our former Secretary of the Commonwealth is here, Kelly Thomason. Thank you, Kelly. She started all of that, and this administration it went through. And we're always advocating for those things. And then the tribes got together and decided at our Sovereign Nations of Virginia conference that we host every year, the Rappahannock Tribe, September 19th at the Virginia Center, Conference Center every year. And you can live stream if you go to sovereignnationsofvirginia.org, you can find it. That got us together and we decided to try to build capacity within all the tribal environmental departments and strategize on how the tribes could better protect tribal lands and how they could conserve the lands around them. And so we created something called the Indigenous Conservation Council of the 7 federally recognized tribes, which the Weisberg Foundation, thank you very much, has funded for capacity building and be able to train and empower those environmental departments for all the tribes. And so it's really exciting to see all the work that's going on in the environment. And we know, we feel the pressure of getting this work done and collaborating with all of the partners to get that done. The RAD project has just come to us with a project that we're going to be working with them on. And so, it's been really amazing to find all of these people that are so concerned. Nate has given money to our group, the Conservation Fund. Just the partners have been amazing. And I know that together, as a village, we can make this thing work. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Chief. As you see, it takes a village, as I stated. And for too long, you've kind of heard me kind of touch on this, but for too long, not just here in Virginia, but quite honestly, across the United States, we've really been fighting this fight with one hand tied behind our back. And I say that because we have not engaged communities of color. We have not fully engaged our tribal communities. Once we take that step of unbandaging that hand, truly working together to improve our environment, that's how we're going to get there. It's not going to be by this piecemeal or paying attention to the communities that are allowed us. It's going to be working with the communities that are least engaged. That's where the rubber meets the road. So I implore all of you to think about ways that your organizations can engage on the ground. Not just thinking about these larger scale issues, what are actually impacting people in your communities. Because that is where the rubber meets the road.
So now I do just want to take the opportunity to once again thank all of our speakers, Chief Ann, Mary Carson, Chris, and Elizabeth, wherever she is. It's amazing for me to hear all of the innovative and just really impactful work that they're doing in communities across the Commonwealth. And I also would like to thank Nathan Terrell, our moderator, for today. When Patty asked me to lead this session planning team, I was a little bit hesitant. And those of you who work in community foundations, you know that we're generalists. We know a little bit about a lot of things, but we know a lot about nothing. We know just enough to be dangerous. So I knew that I was going to have to surround myself, with a planning team who really knew what they were doing. And so I just want to give a shout out to all of those planning team members. Nathan being one, Ray McLean at Javans Foundation, Joe Maroon, right there. And then a few who are not here today, we have Sarah Raskin from CF. Oh, there she is. You snuck in them. And my colleague at the Community Foundation in Richmond, Sarah Ehrenstein-Levy, and Janet Maughan, who is one of the national board members for Justice. So I had, the opportunity to bring them all together and to help us craft this great session for all of you, and I'm really grateful to all of them for their insight and their expertise. And thank you. Round of applause.